Okay, folks, I'm on like Tribeca interviews 7,000, I think, at this point. There's been a whole lot going on, but by far this has to be probably my favorite. When I saw the list of Tribeca films, this was without a doubt, for the moment I read the first paragraph, I was sucked in. I just couldn't help myself. A little film called The Bowery, and it's by no means little. We'll get into that. Lucky for me, I have the two main men here, so please introduce yourselves, fellas. Tell everybody who you are and what you represent.
Wow, that's a big question. I'm Mike Mintz. I'm the co-director, co-producer, and cinematographer of the film.
And I'm Irad Straus. I'm the co-director and co-producer of the film. And thank you for your beautiful words. That's really a big honor to hear. And we're really grateful to be part of this wonderful festival and so happy you're moved by our film.
That's so very kind. Yes, there's more coming though, more good stuff, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, so Mike, I want to start off with you because of course you've got some interesting things that are listed here. I think it's very, very cool that you have a BA in persuasive communication. I was like, how cool is that? I've never even heard of that. Like, what's a BA in persuasive communication? Meaning, what does that allow you to do?
So it was in a general communications degree, and that was the specialization. We learned a lot about propaganda. We learned a lot about, modern means of propaganda, especially at the turn of the century, the different types of, theories and models behind that. And I can't say I remember all of the theories and models, but definitely the materials we covered and, examples we studied definitely stayed with me. But a lot of that just kind of supplanted itself in the back of my brain.
The reason I ask is because oftentimes I'll interview filmmakers that have a background in, of course, film studies or art or theater and that stuff. So I'm curious to ask you how you feel that having this degree at all has helped you be a better filmmaker or a better communicator for that matter.
I think I approach every piece of art as propaganda. I think almost any medium has the potential, and it really is propaganda, whether people know it or not. It's an opportunity to influence people's minds and hearts. And so the way we approach this film in particular, and this is definitely by far the biggest thing I've ever done. I've done a lot of shorts and commercials for different types of, whether it's businesses or nonprofits. There's always usually a message to be told there. And the question is, how do you do that with the right balance of overt and subliminal messaging? And with Bowery, the aesthetic, I think, was a big part of the conversation about how can we most impact people? How can we, rather than just, be too on the nose and preach, to let people experience and learn and change the way they feel and their perspectives through experience rather than being told what to think, being told what to do. Yeah.
It's also really interesting you just bring up the word propaganda, or the idea of propaganda, because there really is no political agenda to this film whatsoever. We don't propose any solutions to homelessness. We're not public health experts. We don't feel like that's our job or really our place to do. But I guess if we're trying to propagate anything, it's just empathy. It's creating some sort of human connection between people who have not experienced life on the streets and the people who experience it every day, to bring that experience, again, with love, to an audience who can hopefully walk away having felt something positive towards a participant in our film, and then hopefully that will impact the way they interact with the next homeless individual they encounter on the street.
That poses a really good question. When you're sitting down and doing this as the creators of the project, were you asking yourself, it's very sensitive subject matter on many levels, without giving away too much. You cover on many, many different areas, many of which are very difficult to watch and difficult to absorb. How do you keep yourself in check emotionally to be able to put forth good effort and be effective while doing a film?
We never had a lot of sit-down conversations. We kind of learned by doing, but also, while just kind of on scene, we would have a lot of conversations, but mostly in the moment. Not a lot of this was premeditated. Personally, my mom worked at a methadone clinic growing up, so I had a lot of exposure from a young age to, heroin addicts, crack addicts. So I think just naturally there was it was a bit smoother to interact with them. And maybe I had the tools that I didn't really process yet, the tools to interact with them and make them feel comfortable and just see them, be with them on a human to human level, as opposed to strictly a documentarian subject, a dynamic, or, a paternalistic kind of dynamic, which we really, really wanted to avoid. And I think it shows in the film. I think gaining the trust of our subjects was the most important element of the film, and they were able to give so much because of that.
Yeah, and for me, I just had a lot of life experience that I think prepared me for this. I spent long time in Tel Aviv. There's mandatory conscription. I served in the military. I'm a war veteran. I also studied psychology in university. So I felt fairly well equipped to deal with the experience of filming the film. And for the most part, honestly, this is going to sound strange, but it was really fun. I know that sounds weird, but it was really fun. On rare occasions, there were days when we would experience heaviness, like extreme heaviness, and you would go back and it would be weighing on your mind for a couple of days. But, life moves on. And again, we were on this scene to do a job and to capture that world. And, humans are resilient. And I think that's one of the messages captured in the film. But that was also part of our experience in making this project is, you just kind of swing with whatever is thrown at you and keep going.
Fun isn't the adjective I would use, but it was exhilarating. I'll use that word.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Definitely. Now, as much as I wish I could say that you guys spend day and night doing nothing but making film, that's not necessarily the case. For instance, I know you work at the JFK Center for Performing Arts, so it's not surprising to me that you would work in the arts capacity during the daytime. But how frustrating or frazzling is it for you? Because I find that most directors, once they're in it and they get the bug bit, you know what I mean? They want to do it all the time. Like they want to be filming all the time or creating the next film. So how do you keep yourself grounded and say, hey, this is my side shuffle, and for right now I'd got to do the day job, etc.
I really think out of Tel Aviv, which is where Irad and I met, I started doing a lot of videos for startups. In fact, Irad's company was the first startup video I ever did. So that kind of set me on a path to do a lot of smaller gigs and hone my craft by doing everything. So I really, I shot, I produced, I directed, I edited, I casted, all these things I was able to do myself. And over the years, I really think that gave me the tools in order to approach this film in a very particular way, which was kind of, how can I do everything I can't do in all my other ventures? And with regards to the Kennedy Center, I really only started working there less than 6 months ago. And the reason I went there was because I love the Kennedy Center. I mean, they have a lot of great acts and I've been able to capture a lot of that. But frankly, a lot of it's also because, working alone is lonely. And after working so closely with Irad on this project for 2-3 years, I found myself wanting more of a social environment, interacting with other film people in DC where there's not a huge scene. I get what you're saying in that now that I've made a film, it's all I want to do, which is 100% the truth. There's reality that I have to take into account as well. But in the meantime,
bills to pay.
Yeah, bills to pay. But also I really do enjoy working there and still working with my clients. I have a loyal client base and it's been great.
Okay. And you, young man, tell us a bit about what you do during the day.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of a funny story. The catalyst for the film, Mike said that he made a video clip for me. I started a startup company when I was in university, and I traveled to San Francisco and ultimately landed in New York. And I ran the company for 7 years, and it ultimately failed. And so I was feeling rather sorry for myself, and I had to move all my stuff into storage. It was kind of bouncing from sublet to sublet, deeper and deeper in Brooklyn. And I started going for long walks around the city and talking to homeless people. And I started having really interesting and illuminating conversations. It was primarily just optimism that I experienced with certain individuals. And I kind of thought, well, wow, I'm being so sour and I really do have so much in my life. And that was a really humbling, but important message. And so I got in touch with Mike, who again had done the viral clip for the startup, 5-7 years ago, whatever it was. And I asked if he wanted to come and maybe film, maybe we could make a YouTube clip, or I don't know. And that ultimately snowballed into a film. But all that to say, now I'm actually working on another startup, my second startup. Nothing to do with film whatsoever. There is a social equity bent to it. But yeah, it's completely nothing to do with film, although I'd love to produce and I would love to direct another film one day. But for me, it's more about a topic that I think needs to be focused on. I think needs to be pushed into the zeitgeist through art and through film. And it's a story that's not being told for whatever reason. And so that's how I felt about this issue. It's not like I need to make a movie, so I'm going to go find a story. It's if one day the story needs to be told, that I'd love to have the opportunity to tell it.
And it was a very organic process. And just as an aside, I've been actively encouraging him to pursue producing.
Look at that. So if I'm hearing you right, it almost sounds like you need the story to find you, not the other way around.
For film, yeah. 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 The film was both an act of art and creativity, which is something that I love to be engaged in. But the primary goal again was a social impact one. There's this growing problem in society, and it's painful to see. And it doesn't seem like anyone is doing anything about it. And like, what can we do?
Just getting to know you folks now. So the one thing I didn't get to research, or I couldn't find by creeping on you, was to see if you all have families, significant others, things like that. Because oftentimes with filmmaking, we talk about balance, about the fact that, especially when you have a family or people in your lives, everything revolves around them first. And then of course your art is secondary to that. So talk to me a bit about that. Do you guys have that whole separate life? And if so, how are you able to put it all together in a nice, pretty little package where no one was neglected?
So for me, Mike's story is much more interesting, honestly. So I'll let him take a second on this one so we can end on a high note. But on mine, I'm single. I've been single I was single while we were filming. I'm single now. So I don't have those commitments. For me, I'm very goal oriented, and my
Sure.
project is a baby. And yeah, I want to create things that are good.
Plus you're in
And
another country, right? I mean, you're out of country and you're in country, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And for me, without getting too personal, at the time we filmed, I was married, and there was, a lot of support, but also, I was away a lot down on the scene, including odd hours, holidays, all that stuff. So suffice to say, and it's not because of the film, but we got divorced pretty much towards the end of filming through post. And it's a very amicable relationship. She came to the screening last night. Yeah, I mean, I saw Irad more than I saw my wife at the time filming. And I honestly spend more time with the subjects in our film than probably with my wife at the time. So I don't have a family now. I have the family that a lot of my immediate family is in DC, which is why I ended up there. But yeah, that's it for me.
If someone's watching this today, and let's say you've got two young kids, let's say maybe even 17, 18 years old, they're like, you know what, let's do our first film together. Tell me a bit about the dynamic of working together, meaning that like my significant and I worked together and I adored him, but let's face it, I knocked him in the head sometimes, like this is stupidity and this is bullshit and I don't want to do this, etc. So tell me a bit about what you believe makes a good working couple, so to speak. Obviously, what makes your dynamic work to where your works of art work so well?
I think it's a combination of a few things. I think first and foremost, our decision-making process is not ego-driven. So we disagree sometimes, but it's always about what we think is going to serve the film the best. We both know that the other's intention is pure. And so that's a really important starting place. I also think having complementary skills is really important. So Mike is an incredible cinematographer. I think I'm a bit of a people person. So I was good at kind of managing the scene, engaging with the subjects, getting them to work with us in the first place. So he also has a lot more of the technical chops. So again, it was a very good collaborative effort. And like the editing room, there were some blowout battles. And in that instance, it was good to have, an editor who's kind of like an arbitrating third party who's able to mediate. But again, I think most critically, if you're both in service of the best piece of art and that's the primary goal, I think it'll work.
And just to add on top of that, when we were on the scene, there was a really clear delegation of responsibility. So I was with the camera, and so Irad and I had this kind of unspoken dance where Irad had the ability to kind of be the eyes and ears of what was going on in the environment, which gave me the room and the breath to just be so intimate with them and be so locked into the lens. And I think it worked out really well in that sense. And not just on the production, but naturally, Irad and I have different tastes, and I think that actually has led to the film that you saw, which is, I think there were many moments where I wanted to go way more raw and wanted to be a lot more not avant-garde, but more biting, more gritty. And Irad, also he wanted that, but I think he wanted something that was also a lot more accessible to audiences.
Yeah.
And there was this interplay between those things, and I think we found the right balance. I think that's because there was this tension in taste that we found this kind of dialectical synthesis with this film.
I getcha. Now, Irad, is it logical to presume that because you have your degree in psychology, that you would be the automatic pick? Because like you mentioned, you're well with people, etc. Could you have seen yourself flipping roles at any point in time?
No, I don't think so, because I just don't have the technical chops to. I mean, the film would have looked like trash.
Okay, then
everything would have been out of focus. I'd be looking at my shoes half the time. It wouldn't have been very good. But in terms of like studying psychology and that and how that affected the film, there's a notion in therapy. I mean, there's a lot, but there's this thing called unconditional positive regard, which is like a concept in positive psychology, and it's basically you like create a safe environment between the therapist and the person receiving therapy, or in this case, the documentarian and the participant in the film. You just, anything that the participant says, you just welcome with unconditional positive regard. So it's nothing is weird or gross or outlandish or inappropriate. You know, it's a safe environment, it's a safe space. You understand, you nod, there's nothing they can say that's gonna warrant any sort of negative reaction or you know. So over time, that generates trust, and they feel very comfortable saying anything and everything and just being incredibly open. And I think, again, creating that safe space between ourselves where they felt comfortable opening up was critical. And I think it really translates on camera as well.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Now, I know that you selected New York City as your playground, so to speak, in terms of making your production. Curious to ask, and I'm already aware of the homelessness issue in general, meaning that the population sadly is very high in New York. Was that your prime motivation for picking New York? Was that, or had you had other areas or locations in mind?
We didn't pick New York.
Yeah, New York picked us. It was just practical because we were living here. So,
Okay.
And again, we never really set out to make a film. We were two good friends. We're creatives, and we decided to collaborate on a little project. And it was just, around the neighborhood where we used to live with some people we met or we knew or we saw or whatever it was. So it was all just very organic.
So let's talk about this film, obviously. The first basic thing I like to do is educate filmmakers. So talk to me a bit about the number one thing that you need, unless you know a lot of people in New York, is money. It's just that simple. We all need money to do everything. So I can only imagine what type of budget you were looking at, just because even the locations seemed not all over the place, but there's film, there's time, etc. So talk to me a bit about how you finance the project. And then second of all, please give a recommendation to, especially early on filmmakers, how to be realistic about how much money is enough money.
In terms of production, it actually didn't cost a lot of money because I already, for my business, I had a camera, I had all this equipment,
Okay.
I had drives. So that was always in place. We had to make upgrades, fine, but it was, there wasn't really a proper production budget. We were kind of just winging it. And, we would bring cigarettes and food often. So honestly, that was kind of the biggest cost of production, I would say, and
Sure.
Subway, really, and just Subways. When it came to post, that's when we actually needed a little bit of a boost because we found this amazing editor, Evie Franks, and we really wanted her to work on the film, and, deadlines were approaching, and, it's kind of cliche, but, I reached out to some family members who believed in the project, and thankfully they helped us out. But I also, I had a lot of my client funds, money made from my business were just straight diverted into finishing this film. But we were also very lucky to have not just the funds, but through Evie, she helped guide us through post as well. The whole process, she found us a great post studio, which they cut us a great rate. So to answer your question about how much is what the right number is, I think we are the last people to answer that question properly because it was just so ad hoc. I mean, we never set out a budget beforehand. We just went with it. We saved money where we could, especially in post. I mean, the post house wanted to charge a bunch of money for the DCP and the audio 5.1 mix. And I was just like, well, let's just save a few $1,000s. And I taught myself to do it on YouTube. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that through production as well. Okay. Again, back to answering your question, the answer is there is no answer. I mean, we met people. There's a team of filmmakers here with a in competition narrative film. I think they shot for $5,000. So it is possible. It takes grit, but if you find the right story, if you find the right talent, you can film it on your iPhone. I mean, it's been done. Right. So we're in a really exciting day and age now where the world is your oyster if you're a filmmaker. If you want to make a Marvel movie, good luck. But there's amazing stories, an amazing way to capture, visual like movies that are still visual without a budget. And a lot of that just comes down to who's behind the camera,
Absolutely. I
not
get
the
you.
equipment you're using. Yeah.
Sure. I figured I'd throw that out there and ask, because obviously we're always picking brains of filmmakers because we assume, you know what you're doing. And I know that you know what you're doing because I've seen the film, and like I said, I don't want to give away too much, but there's a lot that will be covered in the review that speak about that, whether it's the people that you cast, the locations that you did a lot for that nonchalant answer, like, well, yeah, we just kind of did this. We kind of did this. It was very systematic and extremely well substance and just flowing so nicely. I'll put that in better terms.
Yeah, that's two things. It's Evelyn, our editor, who's just incredible. And the other thing was on our end, just persistence. It was really going out there often and at odd hours and just gaining the trust of our participants. We amassed 150 hours of footage, and the film is, an hour 40. So
right,
like 1% of the film or whatever it is actually 1% of the footage is actually represented in the film. So I think it's again a confluence of those two things.
And
Sure.
150 hours doesn't count the time we were on, down there and didn't film.
Right.
So that's just raw footage. Yeah.
Let's center that in to be a little more specific.
Mhm.
Remind me again, because I wasn't sure if it said in the press pack or not, why you centered it on the Bowery area and not somewhere else.
So again, it was just proximity. It was
Okay.
proximity, and it was because we met the first subject we decided to work with was Dollar, who's the first character we're introduced to in the film, and then he kind of beautifully says in the opening credits, so this won't be too big of a spoiler, that he talks to people who don't talk to anybody, and so that's kind of he's the chorus in the film who's gonna introduce us to the rest of the world, but that was in reality how it worked as well. So he was kind of our fixer on the Bowery, and we met a couple of his friends, introduced us to a couple of their friends, and to a couple of their friends. And by the end of the shooting, cycle, we pretty much knew, I'd say, at least 80% of the homeless men and women on the Bowery. So it was kind of cool, like going down to shoot.
And they knew us.
And they knew us, yeah. So you'd go down to shoot, you'd be trying to find your subjects because they don't have phones, they're not easy to get a hold of. And you'd be like, oh, XYZ, have you seen Rubia today? And he's like, no, I saw her 2 days ago down in the subway. And you're like, okay. And so you go down to the subway, you bump into someone else. You're like, you see Rubia? You're like, there, yeah, an hour ago. She was at the Bowery Mission. She just kind of like hot in the trail. And
It's a beat. We just followed the beat. And none of these people at the time had phones. So there was always a goose chase.
Oh, of
Every
course,
single time.
sure. If I were to ask you, one of the hardest parts about creating sometimes is, of course, in a normal production, you're always picking out your own cast based on talent and things like that, all sorts of that. Sadly, again, like I said, we have so many people to choose from. So how did you vet out this person, this person, this person, and then systematically say, okay, we have our top blank, and this is what we're going with?
I really appreciate that you assume it was so systematic, because it wasn't. It was really organic, and we say that we mean it because, we met Dollar, and Dollar introduced us to other people, who introduced us to other people, and it was very symbiotic. In that the people that we ended up filming were the people that gravitated towards us, and it was like this delicate dance, and there was no conscious filtering out.
There's also like a give and take. So there were the men and women we'd film, and they wouldn't really open up, and they wouldn't really give very much. And so over time, you kind of start to gravitate towards the ones who are more willing to open up. So, and again, it just kind of happened naturally. But that being said, there were definitely B characters and C characters who you don't even see in the final film, who again we worked with a lot. We have tons of footage with, but also for whatever reason their narratives weren't as strong, or it just didn't work. It didn't mesh. Charlie Sarge, one of the characters in the film, was initially an A character, and ultimately to kind of make the film tighter and shorter, we dropped most of his narrative arc.
Okay.
But there were lots of people like that. Yeah.
How do you keep the professional wall up in a situation like this, where you're talking about things like drugs, homelessness, etc.? How do you keep it? How does that wall come up? Or I should say, how does it stay up? Because I'm guessing at some point in time, the human condition allows for you to say, I have a heart and I care about these people.
It was hard.
Yeah, it was definitely hard. And there were times where we'd have conversations amongst each other about where to draw the line. So to give an example, there's scenes where there are subjects weaving in and out of traffic, and they're clearly in a state, and it was really scary and really dangerous. And your impulse is to grab them by the shoulder and, push them on the sidewalk and make sure they're okay. And honestly, sometimes we did that when things got a little too out of control, and you really were kind of scared that something bad would happen. But for the most part, we realized our jobs are as documentarians, and these are adults with agency. And our job in this situation is to document. So sometimes it was hard and we would intervene, but we tried to make a concerted effort to kind of keep our guard and remain professional.
And we definitely had good relationships with them. And I think they also understood that, you know, again, they're human, they have agency. They might not be formally educated, but they're not, you know, they're intelligent people. They are very resourceful. And I think they picked up on that. And it was definitely a mutual relationship. And as Irad said, our job was to bear witness for the audience. And you can't bear witness to something if you're impacting the environment. And it was a very tough thing to encounter a lot of the times. But yeah, it's an important question. But it was difficult, but I think we managed to eventually find that balance.
Yes, absolutely. While I was watching it, one of the 5 or 6 different things I'm going to touch on here is survival versus struggle. In my opinion, as a reviewer, one of the things that I noticed was I feel like you are really pushing the button of survival within the context of a struggle per se. So was it more important as people and filmmakers both? Did you really want the survival part to stick out, or did you really want the audience also to embrace the struggle that comes along with that?
I don't even think that we thought about it in those terms, to be honest. We just captured what we no. It's a really insightful question. And that's one of the beautiful things about creating something and putting it out there. When people watch it and come back at you with like their own perspective, like, wow, I didn't even consider that. We captured what we captured, and there are certain things we thought were more powerful, less powerful. We reviewed the footage with our editor. We started to kind of hone in on the scenes that we thought were strong for a variety of reasons. Then we had to kind of find the narrative arcs and flow so that it does feel like a cohesive film. And I think on our end, it was the choices were more narratively driven than, you know, kind of these esoteric ideas of you know, survival struggle. It was really, we wanted to make sure that each character had a beginning, middle, and end. The film had a narrative thrust, that we get some exposition, we get to learn about who our subjects are. We also get to experience their lives on a daily basis. And that was the primary agenda.
If we were going to compare those two, the struggle versus the survival, I really think it's all survival, frankly. You know, when people think about drugs, they often think about getting high. And the thing about heroin abuse is that, you know, it's not about getting high anymore. It's just about getting the baseline. So getting your fix is survival, because otherwise you are suffering to a degree where a lot of people die when they have withdrawal, and it can go south really, really quickly. So, you know, there's one of the earlier scenes, one of the subjects, you know, has just injected himself with heroin, and the first thing he says is, my leg feels better, because there's so much pain when you're in withdrawal that it is just about getting the baseline. So that's I think a representative of the whole film, where each of these people, they're finding what they need to survive, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Relationships is a big part of that. And frankly, drugs are too. There is a struggle in their survival. We're all surviving every day in our own sense. And we just wanted to capture what it was for them, given the resources and their environment.
Let me give a few examples to the viewing audience of, again, I don't mean to keep going back to it, but I'm like, some of the things that in the film, even though you consciously didn't do it, appear very systematic. And I mean that in the best way. That means that you know what you're doing. And proficient filmmakers appear systematic, even when they're not trying to. Case in point, some of the 3 things that stood out to me in my mind were sentences that were spoken from the subjects. Like, for instance, the reference with the drug world being compared to the corporate worlds. Or you have the scene in the subway where she's sitting down and she's like, it's just me and the demons. That's why I get high all day long. I hate my life. I'm like, tell me they didn't plan that. I'm like, there was just this moment where I'm like, he just said this and he just said this. Or the moments where there's absolute silence on the streets with the COVID pandemic going on. Or you've got the moments where you're looking at the faces of the subjects, and maybe it's just me, but they're changed. After the pandemic, you can see the expressions change and how they are feeling and absorbing things, etc. So that's why I say to you systematically, you're pinpointing specifics and making points and touching people with each one of these statements that they're making. They're doing it and you're doing it collectively like a team together without even trying. That's a huge thing for young men to do. I mean, you know, that's wild in a good way.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate that. I think, again, a lot of that is our editor. We just captured everything we could capture. We were really fortunate to work with insightful subjects who were able to express their experience, you know, profoundly. And then our editor just was able to pick up on the moments that were really, really strong. And there were a lot of them that fell, you know, on the editing floor as well. But again, the ones that kind of fit into that narrative thrust, she picked the best of the best. And so it comes together really beautifully, but it's them expressing their reality in their life. So it's, you know, whatever you're hearing is just raw, real, and true. And we were just there to capture it.
We never said, say this, do that, look this way.
Well, of course, right.
Because even if we did, it wouldn't have come off very well.
Or would have come across as like staged or whatever. Like the film feels natural because it just is as raw and natural.
And it took time to get there. There's one monologue specifically just before the pandemic that you couldn't write it. You could never write it how real it was. And the delivery it's so powerful and so poetic that, you know, when we were filming it, we couldn't believe ourselves. You know, that took time. This is somebody who's at that point pretty much given their backstory. It took 9 months to get there. No, it took more. It took almost a year to get there.
Yeah, and we never knew the things that he just in a moment. So again, without giving anything away, there's a scene in the film where one of our characters is just so overwhelmed by what's happening in life and in his reality, he just kind of has an outburst and starts, you know, crying out to the streets about, you know, his childhood and where he comes from and the experiences he's had. And we never had those conversations. We'd asked about his childhood and he was kind of closed off about it or whatever. And again, this is after a year of working together with the person. And then just, he has this kind of explosion where he gives us, you know, this grand 3-minute monologue that's so moving and so beautiful and so impactful and so real.
Yeah, very quickly, we also, maybe in the beginning of filming, before honestly anything that you see on the screen was filmed, we asked questions, but that kind of fell by the wayside very quickly. Most of the time, we kind of just showed up and they just started interacting. We didn't ask questions. They had updates and we just flowed with them and they were very much in the moment. So, yeah.
Gotcha. I found it interesting, and I would have presumed that there'd be more of this, but from what I counted, unless I missed something, there was only the one scene where you had one of the participants in a church, actually, where you see this individual who has every reason to not have hope, but he's still there and he's showing up and he's asking and he's doing that. I'm really surprised. Does it seem logical that oftentimes, like, homeless shelters can be churches sometimes? Oftentimes homeless are very spiritual. So I was taken a bit aback by that. I thought there might have been more of that.
So we didn't really have any access to the shelters. We really were only filming from the ground level and beyond that. None of the participants stayed at any of those shelters, but we didn't have access to go into any facilities. And then during COVID, there was a church kind of in the neighborhood, and so Charlie, the participant you're talking about, wanted to go to church, and so we went with him to church. But you're touching on something very correct. Like there is this. I think a lot of times when you have so little in life, you kind of have to imagine that it's all worth it, and there's some sort of grand, you know, at the end of the tunnel, at the end of the road, there's going to be some sort of redemptive something that's going to have made everything worth it. And I think that's a belief that a lot of the homeless share. And kind of when you're down and out, a lot of people feel the need to kind of give themselves to a higher power. So we thought that was a very important scene. We're very happy that we were able to put it at the end of the film. Yeah.
Oh, you betcha. Absolutely. If I were to ask you, did the film change them or did they change you?
Wow, it's a big one. Film definitely changed me. My politics, my perspective on the world, the way I see the homeless. But in terms of how it impacted them, it's hard to tell. With what happened on screen, it's hard to tell whether the camera motivated them to do certain things. We never asked that question directly. We can say that last night we had the screening and you know, 3 of the subjects showed up and it seemed like they really appreciated it. And that's something that really struck me was, you know, maybe they were the audience the whole time for this film, you know, being able to watch their lives in that sense, which is really a crazy thought to think about. And we had other people who had experienced homelessness in the audience. And also some of them said they had to leave halfway through and they stayed the whole time and they walked out, I think, really, really stunned in a good way. So it's hard. I can't speak for them. I can't say how the film has changed them, but I can definitely say it influenced my life.
So yeah, it influenced my life too. But I have three quick things to say. The first is I think just shining the camera on them. Again, we mentioned earlier, these people are invisible in plain sight. That must be a terrible thing to experience. So we saw they would kind of go from crouched over and we would put the camera on them and they would just come to life and be animated. And so they were movie stars for the half hour, 2 hours, whatever, whenever we'd go down and film. Sure. And I think that just psychologically in the moment during that time, I think that probably was a really positive experience. I don't think it changed any of their behaviors, but I think it was a nice thing to feel validated and special and important. And then in terms of the film being completed now, so we have no idea. It's too early to tell. Like the majority of our subjects, now that we're back in New York and trying to get them to come to the screening, most of them are pretty much in similar places in life. I don't want to give too much away about the end of the film, but not all of them, but some of them are kind of still in the exact same places they were. But I think there's two ways the film can impact them. One is them watching the film and seeing their lives being played back to them, how that will affect them. We don't know, hopefully positively. We had last night the first experience of them seeing it. They were overwhelmingly enthusiastic about it. The second is how, outside factors, people who see the film might then change their lives. So, are they going to get offered job opportunities now? Or are people going to see them more on the street and say, hey, I've seen you in a movie, I'm going to give you an extra $1? Is someone going to come and try and offer them therapy or put them in a shelter? So there's a lot of ways in which this can affect them. But again, we're definitely affected.
One of the things that I wanted to mention was, because you're dealing with the homeless, and I have done myself. In fact, last time I was in New York, one of the things that I know to be true, because I've heard it and I've seen it, sometimes the homeless just want you to look at them. That's one of the things that stood out to me more than anything, is how much time you spent looking at them, just looking at them in the face and giving them the respect that they deserve. I think that's something that, people see people on the streets and just walk right past like this is normal in New York. They're very conditioned to accept that. Whereas you humanized individuals, you brought them compassion and creativity and sometimes laughter and sadness. You gave the audience an ability to be able to reflect and wonder, what are these people like? What did they do before this? You make them question and ponder all of this. So big question for you, because I'm going to ask you to give the description. If Cindy said to someone, well, what's the Bowery about? I would say it's a love letter written to beautiful souls that have lost their way, that felt like they were ignored or forgotten, and you came in and you brought them to life in such a beautiful way. But it's not my film. So creators, tell the audience what the Bowery is about and why they should see your film and not 100 others.
So first of all, I think your answer is way better than what I'm going to say.
It's your film.
But you captured it so beautifully. I think that the primary difference is the format. So most films are kind of the traditional talking heads, interviews, archival footage. They're a bit more impersonal. We just wanted to put the participants front and center and let them tell their story. And there's like the old adage or whatever, walk a mile in someone's shoes. And so we really wanted to create an experience where you were spending a year in their shoes.
And again, I want to focus on the word experience, because what we wanted to offer viewers was kind of a one-of-a-kind documentary experience. We wanted to flip the script on the way a lot of people, watch documentaries and immerse them in a pretty cinematic experience. That's why there's a cinematic score. We wanted to feel like a sweeping journey that the audience can really dive into. And that all just ties into what the message is, which is these are people in one of the biggest cities in the world, through one of the most epic years in recent memory, where the drama takes place on the streets, where in their purview. And that's, for everybody who walks past a homeless person and, they're out of focus, this is a chance to flip the script and say, well, what it would be like to be with them and with them in the foreground and all the movement on the street in the background. So it's a chance to dive in, and I think it's unique. And I think I hope people enjoy it.
It is unique. I've seen other homeless films, but this has just got a very different twist to it. And it's 102 minutes long. I won't lie. Usually I'll yell at filmmakers and say to them, unless you're Robert Downey Jr. or you have a very large following, try to keep to 90 minutes. I pleasantly can say that I wasn't bored. I wasn't I don't want to say entertained, because it's not. it's entertaining in a spiritual way, so to speak. So you don't want to be disrespectful, but I didn't stray. I mean, my ability and focus was there, which for me is amazing because I do 100 things all at once, 102. Now you had your world premiere at Tribeca, of course. I know that it's on the at-home pass right now until the 25th, is it, or 26th?
26th. Yeah, 26th.
Okay, yeah, but right away, make sure you get to, I would say the 25th, because usually they zap them off in like 35 seconds as far as that goes. As I was mentioning to these fine gentlemen, me of all people is quite saddened that they didn't win an award at Tribeca. I think that that would have been very justified on many, many levels. So unfortunately, that was sad to hear. Where are you headed next with the film?
We're hitting the festival route. This is just the first stop as we see it. Despite it being the longest journey of our lives, this is actually the beginning. So we hope to take it to more festivals around the world. We know that, this is a film that's not, it's just frankly, it's not like every big distributor is salivating for it. This is a film that everyone we know who've watched it, it's affecting them and they think about it. This is a film that, we want to accomplish great things, but it's going to have to come from the bottom up. And so I think going to festivals, the more people see it in a theater, the more people talk about it. I think this will get to a wide audience, but it'll take time. And I think it'll take a popular effort.
You betcha. As far as audience goes, you've mentioned having the screening. So how was it? I mean, how was the attendance, et cetera, and the feedback?
It was beautiful.
Unreal. We had to get a bigger theater at the last minute, which was awesome because we sold out, which is incredible. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but by far the most important thing was, again, we brought the participants, or several of them, to the screening. There were also a couple other men and women in attendance who had experienced homeless in their lives. And every single one of them was deeply moved and impressed and complimentary. Some of the participants said they really wanted to watch it again and couldn't wait to watch it again. So for us, there's no more shining endorsement than the people we tried to, the lives we tried to capture, them being satisfied with the work and proud of it, excited by it.
With your film, it seemed logical to me that people like Mayor Adams and the governor were present yesterday, right?
No, not at our screening, unfortunately. No, I wish. We tried to collaborate with a bunch of organizations and agencies. I won't list them, but we didn't get very far with any of that, and it's unacceptable for the people who are living that experience. And it's not pleasant for society at large either. I mean, a parent shouldn't be walking their kid to school and stepping over needles and having to explain why someone is lying in a ditch and no one's doing anything about it.
So before I ask my last question, I'm all about shameless promotion. So please tell me what you guys are working on next, or what's the next thing coming along, you think, after this?
Yeah, I don't have anything to promote. I just want to promote Bowery. Go see Bowery. Okay. Tell your friends about Bowery. Tell your enemies about Bowery. Let's all watch this movie.
And I agree with that point. Go watch Bowery. It's going to be I think, a really unique experience for the audience, and meaningful. And for me personally, I'm working on a feature right now in development. So again, can't give away too much, but it's based on true events. I'm very excited about it. Could take a while until it hits theaters, but yeah, right now it's Bowery. It's only Bowery.
Okay. All right. Now, before I forget, I want to remind everybody how to find you. So we'll start with Mike. I'm going to read this list off of like 70 places. I thought I was everywhere. So this gentleman's name is Michael. Last name is spelled Mintz, just so you know. And he, of course, was the director and cinematographer of the project. He is listed IMDb, BoweryMovie.com, LinkedIn, and then, of course, the company, it's madlermedia.com. He is on Instagram, which is Heirloom, that's HEIR, Loom Camera, as well as the Instagram for Bowery Movie, as well as Facebook. He has a personal page, as well as the MADLER media page. Did I miss anything?
No, you mentioned more than I would have mentioned. So
really? Well, that's what journalists do, though. Like, they dig like everywhere. Okay. For Mr. Straus, you were on IMDb, LinkedIn, and you also have a Facebook personal page. I don't think I found you on Instagram. I think I did look, but I didn't find you.
Yeah, no Instagram. I'm one of those.
Ah, okay. I got it. Okay. And so that this way, these folks can get a chance to see you. So in closing, before I stop the record button, which is sad for me because this truly was one of my favorites, this much I will say to you, and I'm sure you haven't heard it yet, sadly, but you should. As a film reviewer, a journalist, and a founder of a 6-year festival, you should be commended, and I thank you. And I speak for many, many, many people, because what you did was not just create a film, you are creating a movement. And anytime anyone does something that substantial in life, they should be thanked for it, and often. So thank you. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It's very moving. Yeah, we really appreciate it.